So last week, Congress finally passed the American Rescue Plan Act, which is a stimulus package worth about $1.9 trillion, which is designed to aid the American people for the global pandemic that we've been in for about a year now. And this bill includes $1,400 stimulus checks for Americans making less than $75,000 a year if you're single, and of course, $2,800 for married couples making less than $150,000 a year. This is also going to add $1,400 for every eligible child. This is also going to extend the weekly unemployment benefits of $300 a week. So some people have already started to receive their stimulus checks, but other people will probably start to receive them over the next couple of weeks. So previously we've passed 3 other stimulus packages, the first one obviously being aid from the CARES Act, which basically included a $1,200 check, $2,400 for those filing jointly, plus $500 per qualified child, and the cutoff for the individuals was anyone making $99,000 or less, or $198,000 for married couples, and then it started to phase out slowly from there. And the second round was $600 per person and $1,200 for couples, with the cutoff for the individuals being $87,000 and couples $174,000 before payments started to phase out as a part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act. And the difference really with this stimulus is that the cutoff and the requirements have lowered significantly, being $80,000 for single tax filers and $160,000 for joint, which basically means people that are making more money than that, there won't be any additional money for them, basically leaving millions of people that are making a little bit more of a higher income without any direct payment at all. But the interesting thing about this next upcoming stimulus package is not the actual direct payment, but the $22 billion that is allocated for the rental assistance and replenishing the coronavirus relief fund. So basically for those who need it, people who need assistance for their rent, for utilities, and other household expenses are going to be able to get that covered, but they're going to have to meet a bunch of requirements. So the total household income cannot exceed 80% of that area's median income, and at least one household member must be at risk of homelessness or housing instability. And individuals in that particular household must qualify for unemployment as a result of the overall global pandemic. So according to White House officials, priority relief will be directed initially towards the people that need it most, and in other words, the people that have been without employment for 90 days or more will be the first people to go ahead and look and to be able to receive that relief. Approximately $10 billion will be going towards homeowners who have been struggling making their mortgage payment, and $100 million will be going towards helping people that are dedicated to housing counseling. White House officials also said that about $5 billion is going to go towards homelessness and helping fight that cause through the conversion of certain properties into shelters, and another $5 billion will be used for emergency housing vouchers. Now, of course, this is greatly going to help homeowners and tenants across the entire country, but will it really help the overall housing market? And that is the question that ultimately I'm going to go ahead and answer in today's video, so make sure you stay to the end of the video, and if you haven't already, take just a quick second while you're at it and just smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. So one of the biggest problems, as I talk about on my channel all the time, is that we basically don't have any supply, okay? We have a ton of demand throughout the entire country, but our supply is at an all-time low. And of course, while there are a ton of different variables for low supply and high demand, which I break down on my channel all the time, one of the biggest variables is just simply the fact of the pandemic. People not wanting to sell, low interest rates, combined with a very high demand. And obviously, combined with all the stimulus payments driving up all of the asset classes definitely doesn't help. For example, the Fed and Jerome Powell have been really trying to keep interest rates at an all-time low to help steer away from a potential market crash. And they've deliberately said multiple times that they're willing to do whatever it takes pretty much, such as buying up the 10-year Treasury yield to basically keep the interest rates low. And of course, you've got people flocking out of the woodworks to take advantage of the low interest rates, including the biggest demographic ever to ever be in a perfect position to buy a home, and that is, of course, the millennials. So already we had a low supply going into the pandemic, and the pandemic didn't help at all. Combine that with basically the fact that builders are not keeping up with the demand of the market in terms of new home construction for a number of reasons. Obviously, the pandemic being one of them having to stop work for a long period of time, the cost of labor going up, the cost of lumber going up, and so on and so forth. And of course, another contributing factor is obviously people not wanting to move, but not only that, people don't have to move because of the moratoriums. We've seen the eviction moratorium and the foreclosure moratorium back with the CARES Act, and ever since then, they just keep extending them. So people aren't getting evicted and they're not getting foreclosed on, and you've got millions of people in forbearance that are not being forced to move, causing once again this cyclical cycle of not having the supply that is needed for a neutral or a healthy housing market to keep up with the demand. Therefore, of course, causing prices to just go up and literally skyrocket at record paces. So the real question is does the new stimulus package really help with the housing market potential bubble that we're in and kind of start to correct the problem that we're currently facing? According to studies done by Fannie Mae, a lack of supply is the biggest problem, of course, that our market faces today. And from 2011 till now, the number of existing single-family homes for sale has declined by more than 30%. And at the same time, we've seen a massive increase in home prices. So when you really look at it and you're thinking in terms of like affordability, one good way to go ahead and help raise up the supply is to basically make sure that your affordable housing and your home ownership rates are basically at a healthy level. So Fannie Mae suggests that one way that we can start to kind of help the problem is to go ahead and make sure that there's a plethora of available, affordable houses for people to buy. In other words, smaller houses would be good, okay? Home builders aren't necessarily coming out and building a ton of affordable housing that is a little bit smaller for people to potentially downsize into. People are really looking for more of the affordable, smaller house, but more modern, more updated, and newer. But if they can't move out of their bigger, outdated house to move into a smaller, more updated house, then they're probably not likely to move at all. And that is another big contributing factor to this overall low supply. Surveys have actually said that 69% of people are actually open to the idea of downsizing, assuming that the house fits their buying criteria. One of the big ways that you can do that is to encourage builders to build in the criteria that buyers are looking to buy in. But a lot of the builders right now are saying that they don't necessarily have the confidence to build what supposedly the buyers are saying they want. One thought that I have when just kind of looking at that particular overall situation is, influencing the home builders and almost creating the trend of wanting to move into maybe a smaller house, a bit more modern, maybe on the outskirts of town. We've seen a lot of jobs that are going remote and people aren't necessarily working in the office anymore. And I think people aren't necessarily opposed to moving away from the inner cities to the outskirts of town. We've seen statistics kind of show that, but really creating a trend with the home builders, the new construction home builders, to kind of create the overall demand for that particular type of housing, which will cause sellers to sell, to buy the new housing, which will cause supply to go up, which will allow buyers in other markets to come in and buy those homes that are now on the market. One thing I really like is that smaller homes theoretically are easier to build. They're cheaper to build, and the cost of lumber, the cost of labor is all significantly cheaper and overall not as labor or time intensive or cost extensive or intensive than, maybe a lot of the bigger luxury spec build type of stuff that we've seen a lot of lately. In short, what we're really gonna need to look to do is to just create more of a healthy supply and demand. There's obviously a lot of variables that go into the overall housing market, but supply and demand is arguably one of the biggest variables of all of them. And if we don't have a healthy supply or a healthy demand, it causes all sorts of issues like frustration and people just giving up, not wanting to buy or sell because the market is just too competitive. There's a lot of reasons why having a very unhealthy low supply is just not good for the overall market. I'm not saying that we want the market to totally turn and go the other direction and have too much supply and not enough demand, but I think overall leveling it out a little bit to where it isn't as hot of a seller's market and maybe a little bit more of a neutral market would be good for the overall housing industry. So what we really have to ask ourselves is the stimulus package that we talked about a little while ago, is that really going to help the problem, or is that really just like putting another band-aid on the problem? So obviously there's a lot of different variables that we've got to consider, and the housing market is a very complex thing, something that you probably realistically have got to look at sub-market by sub-market, because you probably can't as a whole look at the entire country and be able to dictate or predict exactly what's going to happen, because what happens in California and New York City is going to look a lot different than what happens in Arizona and Florida or Idaho, okay? Because the supply and demand sub-market to sub-market is going to look entirely different. But speaking as a whole here, $1.9 trillion, or should I say another $1.9 trillion getting injected into the market is going to do a lot of things, okay? Number one, it's going to cause more inflation. And we've already seen a ton of inflation, okay? I'll show you what the inflation charts are looking like, which arguably is one of the big reasons that we've seen asset classes like Bitcoin, real estate, and of course Dogecoin skyrocket, okay? Along with obviously a ton of other asset classes. So, overall, looking at the stimulus package and really, pumping or injecting the money back into the economy, what is that going to do? Is that just going to cause even more demand and less supply? Or is that really actually going to help even everything out? And when I really look at it, I think that overall, injecting that particular money into the market isn't necessarily going to help our problem, okay? I think if anything, our problem is going to stay the exact same for now, or potentially get a little bit worse when it comes to the particular supply and demand issue. Now, there's other things that I think it is going to help, and I think that, of course, the people that need the money, if we closed down all of their businesses and we didn't allow them to work or make money, then you gotta step in and do something about that. But when we're talking about it in direct correlation with the supply and demand housing market, I think that if anything, it is not going to help the problem. I think we're going to have to see some other things take place, some other people get involved, and I think overall time is just going to have to play out a little bit more because there's just too many different variables that go into the housing market right now, all the way from supply and demand to interest rates to inflation to the job market to the overall economic factors that play in to the market. You've got consumer spending, you've got all of these different things, and then not to mention, like I said a little while ago, you really can't look at the entire country as a whole anyways, because even if we do ever see, some sort of overall correction, maybe interest rates go up, maybe demand goes down, maybe supply comes back up again, it will really depend on what sub-market you're in, right? Because it is going to make a difference. There are certain areas of the country that aren't experiencing the kind of growth that we're seeing throughout the rest of the country. So we're already starting to see that a little bit. There are different markets throughout the entire country where home values have actually been declining, okay? The majority of the country, we've seen the incline. So you've got to look at migration patterns. I know that somebody really good that I've recently started paying attention to on the platform of YouTube is Ken McElroy, okay? And he talks a lot about migration patterns and stuff like that. And I think that he's dead on because, we've really got to look at that type of thing as well when making any decisions as it comes to whether or not to sell, whether or not to buy, whether or not to rent. We really have got to look at everything to make a calculated decision, okay? So I would love to know what you think. So definitely, if you haven't already, first and foremost, just go ahead and smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. But also, drop a comment in the comment section down below what you think of the next stimulus package. What is it going to do for the housing market? What is it going to do if we are in a housing bubble? Is it going to make it worse? Is it going to make it better? Or is it just going to depend? I would love to know what you think. I would love to interact with you down below, so definitely let me know. Also, I've got a couple of links down below. Definitely go check those out. Also, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it, especially if you're still watching at the end of the video, that you go check out more videos on my channel, as I'm typically talking about business, about finance, and about real estate. I would greatly appreciate that. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.